U.S. bombs Iran. Rising tensions erupt into direct military action in a stunning and highly alarming development. The United States has launched a military strike on Iranian territory earlier this morning. Pentagon officials have confirmed that precision-guided bombs were deployed on what they described as strategic military facilities near the Iranian city of Isfahan, citing alleged threats from Iran's advancing missile capabilities. According to U.S. sources, the strike was a preemptive measure to neutralize what was described as an imminent threat posed by Iran's missile installations believed to be linked to its nuclear weapons program. The U.S. Department of Defense claims it had irrefutable intelligence suggesting that Iran was preparing to deploy ballistic weapons targeting American interests in the Gulf region. Casualties and response. Iranian state media, however, paints a different picture. Early reports from Tehran accuse the United States of committing an act of war and have confirmed civilian casualties, though exact numbers remain unverified. Emergency response teams have been dispatched, and Iranian officials are calling this a brutal and unprovoked assault on national sovereignty. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, addressed the nation in a televised broadcast, vowing a severe and painful response to what he called American aggression. He declared 3 days of national mourning and ordered the military to a heightened state of readiness. Global reaction. The United Nations Security Council has called for an emergency session to address the crisis. World leaders are expressing grave concern over the rapid escalation. The European Union has urged restraint on both sides, while Russia and China have condemned the U.S. strike, warning that further conflict could destabilize the entire Middle East. In contrast, Israel has publicly backed the American operation, calling it a necessary step to ensure regional security, while other allies remain divided, cautiously watching developments. Impact and next steps. Markets have already begun reacting to the news, with oil prices soaring and stock markets dipping globally amid fears of a full-scale conflict. Flights to and from the region are being cancelled, and military bases across the Middle East are now on high alert. Analysts warn that if diplomacy fails, we may be witnessing the early stages of a broader war between the United States and Iran, with ripple effects across the globe. As of now, there are unconfirmed reports of Iranian missile launches toward U.S. military bases in Iraq and the Persian Gulf, but we are awaiting official confirmation. We will continue to follow this story closely and bring you updates as they come in. Our thoughts are with all those affected by this unfolding crisis. The strategic justification behind the U.S. bombing, preemptive defense or unprovoked aggression? The United States government has defended its military action by asserting that the airstrike was a preemptive move necessary to neutralize an imminent threat emanating from Iranian missile and military installations. According to U.S. intelligence sources, satellite imagery and intercepted communications allegedly pointed toward Iran preparing to deploy advanced ballistic weapons capable of reaching American military bases in the Gulf region and possibly threatening key U.S. allies, including Israel and Saudi Arabia. The Pentagon's narrative emphasizes that the strike was limited in scope, carefully targeted, and aimed at disabling Iran's strategic capabilities rather than provoking full-scale war. However, this justification is under intense international scrutiny. Critics argue that the notion of a preemptive strike is dangerously vague and has historically been used to rationalize unilateral military action. Without transparent evidence presented to international bodies, many are questioning whether this bombing constitutes a violation of international law, specifically the UN Charter, which prohibits the use of force unless in self-defense or with Security Council approval. Iran, on its part, has vehemently denied the presence of any such aggressive military buildup and has accused the US of fabricating a narrative to justify imperialistic aggression. In this context, the strike is being viewed by many across the global south as a manifestation of America's long-standing strategy of military dominance in the Middle East rather than a genuine act of defense. This debate over motive and legality is not merely academic, it influences how the world perceives both nations. If the strike is deemed illegal or unjustified, it could further isolate the U.S. diplomatically, undermine its alliances, and strengthen anti-American sentiment globally. Conversely, if evidence emerges that Iran was indeed planning an imminent attack, The narrative could shift toward legitimizing U.S. action as a regrettable but necessary step to prevent greater bloodshed. Iran's political and military response, retaliation, national unity, and the threat of wider war. Iran's immediate response to the bombing has been fierce and emotionally charged. The nation's highest leaders, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei and President Ibrahim Raisi, have condemned the attack in the strongest terms, labeling it an unprovoked act of war and a gross violation of Iranian sovereignty. In his nationally televised address, Ayatollah Khamenei promised a painful and precise retaliation, calling on all branches of Iran's military, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, to be on full combat alert. Domestically, the bombing has sparked a surge of nationalism and political unity. Even reformist and opposition voices have, for the moment, rallied behind the government, calling the U.S. strike a disgraceful act that transcends political divides. Mass protests have erupted in major Iranian cities, and thousands have gathered in mourning for those killed in the strikes. The attack has, perhaps unintentionally, solidified internal cohesion within Iran, as citizens rally in defiance of foreign aggression. Militarily, Iran possesses a diverse arsenal, including mid-range ballistic missiles, drone technology, and proxy forces across the region, particularly in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The possibility of asymmetric retaliation, especially through Iran-aligned militia groups like Hezbollah, cannot be ruled out. Moreover, there are already unconfirmed reports of missile fire targeting U.S. bases in Iraq and the Gulf, suggesting the beginning of a broader retaliation campaign. Should Iran choose to escalate directly or through its regional proxies, the conflict could spiral quickly, drawing in multiple countries and turning isolated military actions into a larger regional war. The crucial question now is whether Iran's response will be calculated and strategic or emotional and unrestrained. The world watches with anxiety, knowing that a single retaliatory strike, if interpreted as a red line by the U.S. or its allies, could ignite a chain reaction with devastating consequences. Global reaction and the fragile balance of international diplomacy and security. The global response to the U.S. bombing of Iran has been swift and deeply divided. On one hand, close American allies such as Israel have publicly backed the strike, arguing that Iran's growing military capabilities and its nuclear ambitions represent a direct threat to regional stability. Israeli Prime Minister has gone as far as calling the action a step toward restoring deterrence in the Middle East. However, other U.S. allies, including European nations such as Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, have responded with caution. These governments have expressed concern that the airstrike could derail years of diplomatic efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal and may lead to irreversible consequences for regional peace.